Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to Fortune India-CIEL HR panel discussion on how future ready is India Inc. And I think this is a very important topic, especially considering the environment we are in. Today, we all are in an era where change has literally become a constant. Earlier, it used to be one off. Disruptions were one off, but now every other day there's some new disruption or the other. Volatility, ambiguity, uncertainty has become a way of life. So, in such a context, I think having the right kind of talent has become extremely important. And I remember in my conversations with many of you had talked about as to how talent has become a key conversation along with growth and profitability in boardrooms today. So it'll be interesting to hear from all of you as to how future ready is India Inc. from a people perspective. And I have a stellar list of panelists out here. And I would be though I'm the main moderator of this panel. My co-moderator is Aditya Mishra, the MD of CLHR, and who's also the knowledge partner for this property that we bring out every year. And without wasting any time, let me first introduce you to our panelists. So we have Rajkamal Vempati, President and Head Human Resources, Axis Bank.
Hi.
We have Josmita Chinte, the CHRO of Boat Lifestyle. We have Uni Krishnan, founder, the Living Machine Institute. Prabir Jha, founder and CEO, Prabir Jha People Advisory, and Dr. N.S. Rajan, former Group CHRO, Tata Sons, and former CEO, IDFC Foundation. Thank you very much for making time. So, Raj, I would first like to start this conversation with you since you were the winner, since Axis Bank was the winner in our maiden issue of Future Ready Employers. And I'm sure you have lots to say in terms of talk about in terms of forward-looking practices. My first question to you is rather basic. How's the future of work changing? How's the nature of employment changing?
It's as basic and a lot has been said. Thank you for having this conversation and spotlighting, the entire conversation on a very important aspect. You talked about disruption. You talked about how change is happening, and we're also talking about how we are getting people who are digital natives or people who've just been bred on social media from a very early age coming into the workforce. The three aspects that I would say is changing from a workforce perspective, and that's the reason why we've had to pivot as a regulated entity with all our restrictions. We had to pivot some of the models that we have. I think seeking flexibility is no longer a benefit with people. It is in a sense the commodity that it's like roti kapda makan flexibility. So you need to think about when in the past when anybody wanted to say I want to pick up my son from school, or you say, oh, I have to take care of my aged parents, the managers would decide and would extend it on basis of benefit, saying, oh, the person is very good, talented, etc., let me extend the benefit. So I'm just saying the difference is it's no longer a benefit. You've got to include it in as part of your workplace practices, policies. And that's why if I look at it at a large scale, Axis Bank on the non-customer facing roles we've committed to being hybrid. We've committed to say people will log in and log off at various points in time. So it's okay. We got to afford that flexibility of geography, flexibility of format of work that they would want to be available. And there are obviously full-time roles also, but some flexibility in your workplace models and employments you should have. Second change is in terms of work. Actually, we are restricted by work being either home or work being either in office. Work is actually in your mobile. Workplaces are your mobiles, your digital devices, whatever have you. So if you architect your productivity enablers, etc. And I'm not talking about just the transaction processing happening on mobile, but getting the entire workplace on your mobile, especially for customer facing roles or other people as well. Most of us, it's the digital device that's our workplace. So you've got to think about the future of workplace around those times. Third is, as I would say, work is becoming more digital. Technology is all pervasive. We should not forget the humanness. And in fact, a lot of people seek out the conversations with people, having those chat, even with the wellness check-in. So I think some of the aspects remain enduring, like culture and the various other contracts that you have. But I think in terms of the work and the models, work is changed. Work can definitely happen from anywhere. Geography is no longer a barrier. Technology is helping you do that. And now with AI, etc., work is going to change even more. So you've got to pivot the entire template of work and the job descriptions and all those, so on and so forth. But for me, the big change is hybrid, working remote. There is no choice. There is absolutely no choice. Organizations have to move towards that. And the last part I would say is, because workplace is on your device, work is also extended 24/7, which is an unfortunate reality.
Coming to you, Dr. Rajan, you were with Tata Sons for the longest time, and now you consult many companies. You help companies to put together their HR strategy. So it'll be interesting to hear from you. How are employment contracts evolving?
That's an interesting one. I think Raj Kamal covered the future of work, but there are a couple of elements I just wanted to add to that before I answer your question. At one end, you have the availability of workforce itself as a challenge when you're talking of future readiness, and it requires a combination of many things, and both at the national level and stakeholders involved, all of them have to come together. So you have an ecosystem that has to be available for creating workforce of the future. You need to ensure education is taking care of that. There has to be a need for employability of skilling and all of that that goes into it. And then we move towards employment and entrepreneurship as two elements. And the current numbers are such that we are talking about a global population of almost 8.5 billion, of which 1.5 billion is India. And 67% is the working population, which essentially is actually moving to a direction where 25% of the workforce worldwide is going to be from India. So there is a lot of work in terms of availability of workforce and development of workforce that goes prior to actually them entering the enterprise. Well, having said that, in terms of expectations, what really is happening is that there is a change to a degree where people are seeking equitable relationships. It's not a one-way street in terms of acceptance, and there is an increasing need to be able to move from a transactional, mercenary kind of relationship to a larger progressive and mutually beneficial, mutually invested relationships. And today, most employees expect to work with leaders and not work for leaders or work for enterprises. And that's a major shift in terms of where it's going. What is also happening is that from a larger expectations, on one hand, you might have organizations expecting people to be engaged, and they're largely focusing on welfare in most cases. I think today the need is actually to move towards well-being, and when all the panelists understand the importance of it. And perhaps you have to move from engagement towards happiness at work, which is far more holistic, far more humanistic in terms of our approach, because you're talking to an organization, and your real capital is the people who are there with you. And to that extent, to safeguard that, I think this movement is very, very necessary movement. And there are 4 dimensions that organizations really need to take care of. Ensure that you have inspiring leadership, make sure you have progressive practices, create environments where there's autonomy, growth, and development of individuals, and most importantly, also enable personal fulfillment. I think all of these have to come together to make a real impact in terms of managing the future.
So all these things, to my mind, I think we're talking a great deal about culture. Culture has become an important component. I know many organizations focused on culture, but not many. I mean, there are lots who don't really focus. I mean, culture isn't an important component in their entire strategy. So, coming to you, Uni, I would like to kind of understand uh, what does an employee mean to an organization today? Kind of one hears of employees being laid off all the time. So is kind of like, are organizations kind of too involved in the mechanistic idea of doing business, of growth and profit, of chasing growth and profitability, or are they or is people an important topic? And you come from a global background, so it'll be interesting to hear from you. How is the concept of work changing?
Just to pick on the threads which Mr. Rajan talked about, I think there is a deep concern, especially in the Western world, that mental illness, mental well-being, burnout has become, firstly, it's skyrocketing year on year. And many people do not actually connect it to another dot, which is corporate mortality is rising fast. So if you think the individual human being is burned out, the collective corporation is being burned out even faster. These are really astounding trends which have not really captured our attention sufficiently. So at the Peter Drucker Forum last year, we had a debate about these matters. And one of the main conclusions was that the way business success is portrayed to our people, which is largely a mechanistic quarter to quarter, a linear growth chasing approach, which is currently prevalent in companies, seems to have very adverse effects on mental well-being of employees, where employees are simply reduced to cogs in a larger corporate machine. And this is substantially impacting the longevity of great organizations. I do not need to mention the names of companies which have perished and fallen on the sword, including the great GE, which was once regarded and touted as the greatest management excellence icon of the world. So I will rest my case by just connecting the two dots, Ajita, which is burnout of individual employees results in burnout of great corporations. Are we sensitive to these larger trends sweeping across the global landscape? And what are the implications for corporate India if such trends start to catch up in India?
That's a very interesting point. Coming to you, Prabir, it'll be interesting to hear from you. How important is culture, especially in a VUCA world that we live in today?
I have moved on from the VUCA reality. I talk about being in the Bani world, right? It's brittle, anxious, and incomprehensible and non-linear. So, the world is different, and the world is getting different. But the more I see, the world evolve and change, the more I see the world exactly, at least within companies, the way it always was. Leadership continues to be mediocre. Inspiration is low. I do not think all this talk of high stress at work is a new thing. It's just becoming more obvious and visible, right, and evident. So I, unfortunately, am a little more skeptic about, the word culture, because most people don't even understand the word culture. It's not about being nice and good and congenial and happy. I mean, that's one variant. Culture actually has a very strong strategic connotation, which will include maybe dimensions like this, because good talent has a choice, always had a choice. I have left companies, or I've left leaders, or I've changed lines because I just did not want to work with some people, right? So I don't think it is something very new, but culture, to the extent that companies need to articulate very clearly, from the time of hiring to the time of decisions that they make, because it's only fair to the other side. Unfortunately, what I see, and that's why I feel everyone is wanting to be a cookie cutter. The issue is everyone wants to be another Me Too. Not hashtag Me Too, it just wants to be a clone of the other, right? And everyone gives a campus PPT pitch to a candidate, which is so unfortunate. No company is as perfect and lovely as they posture. No leader is as lovely as they want to be seen. I would like a lot more of authenticity at play, both to the external candidate and internally to employees. I think the hypocrisy of leadership bugs me today. I mean, it really bugs me. And, there are unending stories and at all levels, I'm not only talking about the C-suite, that of course is guilty, but it is down the line. And therefore, in a world where hypocrisy is prevailing, understanding of what really culture is experience. It doesn't matter what you have talked about, what town hall message you send, what you do as an induction. To me, it is all innate. It is the experience which will actually let people know, do I belong here? Do I want to belong here? And now in the last 5.5 years, when I opted out of being on the corporate treadmill and I see now companies and the HR agenda from the sidelines, I'm actually very concerned, very disturbed, because everyone is just mouthing the right things. But you talk to people in the same organizations. I don't hear that, what the top leadership is saying. I don't hear it at all. In fact, the desired response in engagement surveys, and personally, I'm not a fan of this great place to work racket. Everyone is a great place to work, like ISO 9000 used to be, because you get recertified. It's a business model, right? So I feel that culture is what people experience, and culture is what strategically, hopefully, enables the execution and success. These are the two ends that I would like it to be, and it all starts first with the way we think. There must be congruence between thinking, saying, and doing. It's then the experience. It's then the behavior. I think lack of integrity starts there. We say a lot of things which we actually don't practice, or we don't really want to we can't say, oh, we trust our people, but you have a policy regime which goes 5 levels up or 3 levels up. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? So to me, it is more honesty, less hypocrisy, and a lot more of perestroika, glasnost kind of thing. I mean, I have a reputation of opening doors and windows in my executive life, and I actually feel we need to do a lot more, and without trying to be embarrassed about, what will happen. Will we lose control of things? You never lose control of things. The more you open, the more people take self-ownership. So that's my take on what I feel is the challenge with culture in companies today.
Can I do a follow-up question, Praveen?
Please.
You talked about moving from the VUCA to the Bani world, brittle, incomprehensible, anxious, and all of that. So the point that you made about leadership behaviors, that people are mouthing the right things, but in execution it looks different. Probably this was there earlier as well. In your observation, is it that in today's reality, this variance is becoming more visible and more important than ever before? Can you connect the current reality with this behavior and tell us a little more?
Very, very well said, Aditya. I don't think it is something that again has been born today. That I'm very clear. I don't think, like people say, oh, post-COVID this happened. I don't think fundamentals of leadership, fundamentals of running an organization have changed because of COVID. I don't think. The nuances may have varied, but at the end of the day, if you look closely, I think leadership challenges always were there. But to this particular point of why it has become more important is, people have, and I think Raj made that, comment, people have become more aware. The world has shrunk. So what you do, say, not do gets carried overnight, almost by minutes, not overnight, in minutes. And therefore, the need to be very clear about what you are, who you are, what you stand for, what you say, what you don't say is important, right? And, my personal view is it is important also to be fair. I'm not saying you must do what everyone else wants to hear or everyone wants to see. There will be some people who will find themselves enjoying a certain leader or enjoying a certain culture or company, right? And the more honest you can be about it, the better choices people will make. And today, I think you have an opportunity of doing that. The reason I feel upset and angry is we all want to look good, right? When will that end? You don't need to prove yourself. Yeah, you're in the C-suite. And I coach a lot of very senior executives and chairmen of companies. And I actually wonder, is the guy wanting to impress you even as a coach? You don't need to. You honestly don't need to. It is more about seeking vulnerability. more admitting I don't have all the answers. And because people keep you under a microscope, like the recent that 90 hours or whatever stare day conversation, right? It may have been an innocent conversation out of the blue, but you got to know what to speak, especially when you're on video, and stand up for what you believe and what you say. So I think the sense of very conscious spotlighting on activities, actions of companies and leaders, I think that has become very acute. And to that extent, companies need to be first more honest, more aware, and thirdly, more consistent with what they say and do.
Ajita, Aditya, if I may come in. So
Yeah, sure.
just to take the point forward, we talk about the employee and in the context of the organization as a receiver, somebody who's receiving the services, policies, programs, etc. And on the other side, typically the conversation has the leader who needs to be more authentic, etc. Yes, we are on stage 24/7. Information is everywhere. Everybody is recording with the smartphone, and innocent remarks get out also. But I also, in this conversation, I think I also would want to spotlight the case of the poor manager and the challenges of the poor leader. The time has shrunk even for the leader to be effective, and the quarterly earning cycle has become more acute, right? And COVID actually highlighted another interesting aspect for people. They were managing the task of running operations. The first time it came to the fore that not only were they managing their own emotional upheavals, obviously they were anxious, but they had to do it day in, day out, day in and day out. So what volatility post-COVID and everything else has done as well is the challenges and the complexity of the environment has posed so many more challenges and muscles that they weren't aware that they had, and have to, in a sense, learn on them by themselves whilst managing the operations the way that shareholders seek, predictable, consistent, etc. So when in all this kashmakash, there is that entire angst that is there, and that's why the facade and perhaps things come in and you revert to the old normal. This is how leaders need to be. And I think that's where work also needs to be done within organizations, and some space has to be created, which is where a humanistic and human organization, where conversations can happen, but it's okay to fail. There's not such a premium, and it's okay to have the challenges and open up, because everybody's going through the same thing. But from the organization's perspective, if you don't know the answers, some curveball gets hit, we will say, okay, manager, go figure out, leader, go figure out. There is no rule book. And it's becoming even more acute. So I think I just wanted to spotlight, we talk about the poor employee and all of those choices. There is a challenge of leadership, and acute challenge of leadership as well.
Coming to you now, Josmita, you are with Board, which is a new age organization.
Yeah.
I think almost over 80% of your employees, if I'm not mistaken, would be Gen Zs. So how difficult is it to manage a team, such a young team, and what really is the role of the leader here? How important the role of a leader is in an organization which is largely manned by Gen Zs?
I think it's obviously on work project. I think I represent a younger, population in a startup, and I speak on behalf of all of them. I think that the best thing about having Gen Z is, they bring fresh energy to the entire organization, right? So it's not only them, but they also push us to be very creative, in all our work and processes, right? But they come to their own challenge, and I think somewhere there are a couple of things that we did which we thought was at least helped us for managing them. One thing that's different between Gen Zs and which we might have not seen earlier is they all prioritize meaningful work and professional development, right? So they don't join an organization just for the sake of getting a role. They actually want to understand how it will help their career. So they need to resonate with the company, the plan, and the role quite well. So I think that's something that we really prioritize whenever we have, younger population. For a leader, I think a couple of things that which help them. One is empowering them our own journey, right? So ownership is very important for them. So the ability to make decisions, even while they're making a mistake, to actually encourage them, because they are all younger kids. But when you actually put them to have accountability, to have ownership, and to make decision, I think that works quite wonders in handling the younger population. The second thing is absolutely zero hierarchy. These are employees who actually want to stay their mind, and they don't understand the difference between levels and layers. So for them, the ability to open a door and have a communication with a founder or the CEO or any takes a role and actually speak up their mind and share their, share their ideas, I think that works wonder. The thing which also works for us is, having these young role models. As an organization, we have the state force, which is a combination of experienced people, but we also have a young, leaders who bases their own skill and ability of actually come up. So they serve as a great role model for all the Gen Zs who think that they resonate better with them, and also look up to them to see that, hey, look at my brand marketing and product marketing, it has reached so fast, so early. I think those are a couple of things that, at least we try our best to handle in that.
Thank you. Coming to you, Dr. Rajan, it'll be interesting to hear from you about a little bit about importance of employer branding, because now whenever I do an HR story, when I speak to the CHR of a company, they tell me how important employer branding is, because earlier it was clearly the prerogative of the employer to choose the candidate, but now it is quite possible that the prospective candidate would kind of not want to join that employer. So in today's times, how important is employer branding? I mean, that's a term we've been hearing about for many decades now, but especially in today's time, how important, what really is the significance of employer branding?
The more things change, more things remain the same. I don't think it is true today. Employer branding per se, in terms of a value proposition you have on the table, has always been relevant. So we sometimes overestimate the context. I do understand that the future is not what it used to be, and things are changing, and it's probably getting less predictable. But the core is in terms of what do you stand for, who you are, what you stand for, what is in it for you as much as what is in it for me. I think that element, when addressed well, takes care. So if I take just the employee angle, any organization should have clarity in terms of what is the philosophy to begin with. And then that philosophy will be an overarching guide in terms of policies that you have and the way you practice. And whether you are able to walk the talk, whether you're able to actually consistently have the ability to reach out to the bottom of the pyramid. And the moment of truth really is where, let's say, an employee at the end of the value chain actually meets the customer and speaks. What he communicates, what he is, and what he or she does there reflects what the actual organization is. And I think today the sources of information are wide. People talk to each other. There are, whether it is surveys, whether it is any of that, people have far greater access to knowledge that we didn't have in the past. So to that extent, employer branding has become that much more important. And we are almost in a world where it's very, very difficult to hide what you wish to. I think we live in a world where everybody lives in glass houses. And to that extent, how you conduct yourself, how you are as an organization, how really you believe in serving customers on the outside, taking care of the customers on the inside, I think there is that larger element where some things are blindingly obvious. And you don't need to take names, you know the way, for instance, if you're talking about even the concept of separating people. People understand when business models change, there could be a possibility that things like that would happen. But the way and the manner in which you do things speaks a lot about who you are. And in my mind, character or an employer brand is what you are in the dark. It is what you will do, not because you need to be a brand, but because you believe in it innately, and therefore in your behaviors, those beliefs are actually shining through. I think that is what really creates an employer brand. And all else, I mean, it could be a poster on the wall in terms of how you are, but if the values and the vision are not embedded in the hearts, somewhere you will find the gaps and the chinks will develop and they become larger and larger. So my sense is employer branding, or the value proposition you take to any employee or prospective employee, I think has that connect, which is very, very critical. And it's always been, in different ways. And probably today, because of the changing world, because of the fact that people know far more than what they used to in the past, there is a speed of communication. All of that makes it even more imperative that you ensure that you do the right thing because it is the right thing to do and not to appear right. I think if you're able to bridge that gap and stay true to your purpose and values, I think it becomes obvious. So the good is obvious, and so is the bad.
Actually, the bad is more obvious. What you said, yeah, the bad is more. But Dr. Rajan, don't you agree that because you said purpose, inspiration is also what people seek? I also find that people are seeking a lot more purpose and congruence with purposeful organizations. Some of the stuff that you talk about, whether diversity, equity, inclusion, or sustainable practices, they definitely would want to see a lot more of it. If they don't, and I know people who rescind offers and say, no, maybe this is not the place for me. Yeah.
No, I'm completely with you there, Raj Kamal. I think it's a very important element. See, again, I think over time, the awareness of the world around you, because of your access, even something as core as an internet, or what you were referring earlier in terms of mobile being the world around you, and today it's democratized, right? You see the UPI transactions, it tells you that no more you don't really need to go to a bank.
Yeah,
you're there in your mobile, and what it's really opening up is the concept of awareness itself has changed, and to that extent, I think the need becomes even more acute. But the need has always been there, and any of this, for example, you can't talk of diversity and not practice it inside. In fact, Prabir was referring to the need for that authenticity in terms of what you say and what you do. I think they all come together. So when you're talking about individual character, I think same is true for corporate character. And the character is reflected by who you are, what you do, and you do it because you believe in it, rather than doing it for somebody else's sake or putting up an image or a front. So we are not marketing an organization. We're just being true to ourselves. And therefore, you are creating a congruence for somebody on the outside whose purpose and your purpose get aligned. And which is what actually unlocks that congruence.
I would like to come to you, Unni, now. I know you have a very strong view on purpose and you talk a lot about scarce capital. It will be interesting to hear from you as to, how important is purpose when it comes to building an organization.
Right. So just to carry forward some of the arguments which the earlier speakers made, I think the nature of relationship with the employees, somebody mentioned it is transactional, it is mercenary, words to that effect. And also whatever Mr. Rajan was talking about now, with the separation between the good and the bad is getting very acute. So we had done a research on India's lasting value creators 100. This is a research we had done on India's top 100 companies over the last decade or more. And what we saw is exactly that, which is more and more organizations we refer to as living machines, where the living elements, whatever Mr. Rajan was calling as character and an ability to embed certain qualities, etc. We have factored around 10 living elements. And the life force of those organizations is far more stronger than many companies where the machine drives the living. And it's a very, maybe appearing as a play of words, but it has some profound implications. How many of us would like to be part of an ecosystem where the living drives the machine versus the machine driving the living? And the research clearly points out that for many companies, words like purpose, equity, and diversity, and all of these lovely words that are being thrown around is really nothing but confetti, and is being used purely for dressing up a very brutal machine, which is devouring the living. And what we also found in the research is that such companies have a profound deficit in longevity, because in financial value is a very important part of value called perpetuity value. And perpetuity, by the very utterance, is that which is living, is that which is perpetual. Correct? So if your living components, if your characteristic components, your vital components are on the depletion, it is only merely a matter of time, this Bani or whatever world that we are talking about, where your organization will be swept away within the tide, within a short period of time. This is one of the principal reasons why corporate longevity world over is plunging. And I think Indian HR managers and others who are guardians of the life force of the organization can really look at many of the case studies which are out there, Boeing being a great example of a company where the life force has been sort of sucked out. And maybe the last and most important part, which is a lot of the discussion was going on about the poor leaders and the poor managers, etc. Well, what have they beholden themselves to? They have beholden themselves to certain zombie ideas which we had over the last 30 to 40 years, and they have wedded to quarterly numbers. The country which propagated quarterly earnings has disposed of it into the dustbin of history. Only if we looked around and sort of seen that the UK, which started the whole idea of 30, 40 years, quietly through an act of parliament, abolished quarterly earnings due to a K Commission report, which primarily said that quarterly reporting is one of the reasons which is the national risk to the UK economy. Now, we got to be we had to keep our eyes really wide open here, because the world, the Western world is learning a lot of lessons from the excesses that it has undertaken and is recalibrating itself. Are we merely just copycatting ourselves to some zombie ideas which they propagated 30, 40 years ago?
Aditya, you want to comment?
No, I was kind of stuck on that point of that employer branding and the purpose-led employer branding. I was wondering whether the drivers of employer branding are changing, or the organizations need to really look at any change there in the architecture of those drivers. As times are changing, of course, the expectations of employees are changing, multi-generational workforce and the diversity and societal awareness and a lot of things that we have spoken about. I'm wondering whether the drivers of those are changing slowly with time. And if so, then how should leadership adapt them? That's the question. So it's a probably loaded question. I don't know who would like to take.
Oh, I'll take all loaded questions. I've had no reputation of being politically correct. See, no, it's a very good question. The first thing is, what is a company's employer brand? Does it have to be as monoclonal as we assume? When talent itself has so many genetic slices, right? Is it even strategically right to think of one particular, this is me? So, and that's which is, at least in my understanding, a trap many companies fall into. They believe there is a ubiquitous employee, and there is no ubiquitous employee, right? So that's the first thing that strategically management teams don't get right. The second thing is, see, you have to define and understand first, what is it that your target employee or that segment of employee actually is seeking. Normal organizational behavior, which comes from the fact that I'm still employing, मैं तुम्हें नौकरी दे रहा हूं, mindset, which is absolutely misplaced, does not understand what is it that the other person is seeking. And this happens even in our homes with our household staff. They have an option. They can move from one apartment to the other. So, it's the same concept. You've got to decide if you are gunning for that talent, you've got to first understand that kind of slice of talent and understand what is it that they are seeking. It's, therefore, I have not been an admirer of these oversimplified Gen Zs want this, millennials want this. I mean, do you think a millennial in Jumri Talaya is the same as a millennial in New York? They aren't. But, we just kind of broad brush the entire thing, and which to me is absolutely misplaced. The third thing about this entire thing is, if you are aware of what that target catchment of talent seeks, you have to be honest with yourself. Is that you? Either by intention, by belief, by philosophy, by wherewithal, don't try and just posture to be an imposter. Try to posture and in turn you become an imposter. This entire thing of Me Too, cloning each other, almost you can, and throwing the big words around is meaningless. Because I again come to the point, the only thing which sustains is experience. More than what we talk about in our public programs and policies and award nights and stuff like that, actually counts for little. What counts is what employees talk about the company. And unfortunately, that's not what we typically want to hear as senior executives. We try to explain it away, but that is the honest truth. And the last point that I want to mention, see, more than corporate brands of employers, my thesis, and it's been a thesis which has actually been growing stronger with every passing year. And I've talked about this even when Joey, you were part of my team. It's because I had an experience even in Tata's, where a guy coming from one of the best known FMCG guys, I was trying to do a cross industry hire. And he loved meeting the CEO, he loved meeting me. And then finally, when I got him to meet the line manager to be, because I had to create a role, the guy called me after that meeting and he says, Prabir, I can't join Tata Motors because I did not find my manager to be inspiring. So the point I'm making is, in today's world, people want, and they research the manager. What is Raj's personal brand? What is Aditya's personal brand? What is Prabhu's personal brand? They do a full diligence, and they should, rather than just the companies that we represent. Because at the end of the day, most of the experience of that individual is going to be with a smaller ecosystem. It's not with 20,000 other employees. So the power of building an authentic and therefore meaningfully appealing manager brand or a self brand of whoever is the manager, I think is going to prevail more than the so-called PR campaigns of company A and B and C. And I think it's a thought that not many people think about. It's not that they even coach their, and I'll end my thought there. See, part of the problem is, both for business purposes, but since the question is in the context of employer reputation, and I'll speak from my experience, I get invited to do a lot of coaching sessions for the C-suite. So many MNCs, Indian companies across sectors. But I'm appalled they don't reach out to say, hey, why don't you coach the high potentials in my company? How can you get them, except for one company, a power company, which called me and said we want you to talk to them because you want them to experience the power of what a branded leader is like. And I want the middle level people, who are going to be there to become aware, because ultimately they have to use this appropriately when they are building out their teams. Everyone else, all of us on the call, we are just enabling, the manager to hire, but it's the manager who finally is the make or break of the experience and of the. So I think we just need to move away from this Uber employer brand to focusing more on helping managers and leaders understand how your own brand recall or lack of it or whatever else it could either be a magnet or could actually repel the kind of talent that you're wanting to seek.
Prabir,
Aditya,
yeah,
I just
please
want to
carry on.
add to what Prabir was saying.
Yeah.
So, Tolstoy in Anna Karenina talked of the fact that happy families are all alike. And every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. It's almost alluding to the fact that when you talk of virtues and vices, even from a corporate parlance, the virtues largely remain the same. There are character strengths, be it compassion, be it generosity, authenticity, integrity, kindness. Those remain the same, but the vices have multiplied. So somewhere in the way in which we actually are not handling things right, the universality of goodness or universality of being a meaningful brand, having clarity of purpose, ensuring that everybody is aligned and together, and where there is a shared vision. And I really believe that that shared vision is a shorthand of leadership. And if that is absent, there is no brand. And I think that really is at the core of the issue.
Just finally add, I'll just, taking forward the Pradeep and Rajasthan. It is more saying a new company where you have different media companies and different organizations, right? So somebody has come from, the Tatas, the HUL, and then imagine for that company where and the company brand itself is very strong. So you are struggling between, integrating the company brand with the employer brand and with the manager brand, because the managers themselves are stalwarts, right? So a lot of the time, and we face the challenge, and I'm sure other companies also facing, is what should our employer brand be? What should our values be? Because again, everybody comes from with a different perspective. So even to get them together, all the leaders can drop something which is very unique to your organization while taking learning from the other organization itself was very difficult, but very, very crucial to be done.
Interesting. My next question actually would be, it will be nice, Prabir, if you can take it, around DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Everyone talks about it, but I see very few companies walking the talk. Each time, every year you have the Pride Week, and the communication heads of every perceivable company call me, asking me to do a story on the Pride Week. And when I actually get talking to them, I realize that, they've hardly done anything. They would have hired one employee or two employees, or they may have hired five employees, but out of which they failed to uh, retain three of them, and only two have kind of stuck onto the workforce. What kind of a mindset change is required? Why are people not able to, why are organizations really not able to walk the talk?
I don't know whether I'm the best guy to answer this, because I thought I was a champion throughout my career of D and E and I, when we did not even have that expression. Every team that I led, I had someone who was visually impaired hired on my team, every company without exception, and without reducing standards. I did 6 months of maternity leave. 17, 18 years later, Government of India made it a law, when no one talked about 6 months of leave. See the issue, but I have moved from that worldview, I'll be honest, when I look back. And it's after a long time I'm answering a question on this, because now I've stopped even going to conferences I'm invited to speak at DE&I, because I honestly don't think beyond suiting selective catchments, it's being played out in the spirit it was possibly intended. I think the time has come for us to talk, and I've written on this extensively, about pluralism. See, at the end of the day, it's not about affirmative action and tokenism and, I want to hire a C-suite person, Prabir, can you get me? But, the person has to be, a diversity candidate, read whatever, right? I swear by meritocracy. If all of them happen to be of some ilk, so be it. It is not about quota system. I've never led teams like that, and I don't believe in it. The other dimension is, at the end of the day, why are you doing this? You're not doing it just because the West did it. Because if you did it, and I love the fact that Tony brought that point up, because then we should be ready to throw it in the dustbin, because there's already a backlash in the US, and I can tell you in India it will happen. And it happens all the way from board composition all the way down. And it is absolutely corroding. No one will like to say it. No one will publicly say it. But it is corroding merit. There is no doubt about it. When you start saying, okay, I only want this because I need two people of this kind to be filled, then by default, you're excluding people who may have been better qualified. So that's the first part. But I am raising a deeper question. And you use the word mindset. The mindset has to be one of genuine pluralism. We went to the same business school. We are all guys from one part of India or one part of the world. We are all 6 feet tall. My daughter and I will always think the same, because it's the same ecosystem, the same societal background. Just because she's a woman, she'll think different is bizarre. It doesn't work like that and should not work like that. It's almost like when someone says, oh, women are more empathetic than men. They haven't met me. And Joey will agree, all right? So the fact of the matter is, we've got to break stereotypes. We have to authentically and genuinely build pluralism, where there are different ways of looking at a problem. There are different ways of architecting a solution. And that is the wisdom of getting a DEI agenda in the workplace. Whatever DEI will mean in a certain context, it is not necessarily about the usual sexual orientation, gender, blah, 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 multi-generation, all of that. It doesn't matter. The strategic question, if I was sitting on the board, would be to ask, how plurally different does your organization think? Is there enough acceptance of diverse opinions and views? Or does the CEO decide everything and everyone around him, the C-suite, is largely managing survival and their bonuses? Which is, it's the hard truth, that's how it is, right? So D, E, and I, and when you're getting the PR guys reaching out, for a story, it's again the same employer brand conversation that Rajan talked about. We are kind of painting the mule to make it look a horse, which is not the intention. It is all about crossing your heart and asking some pretty fundamental questions. That is this a place where different ideas are tolerated, different points of view survive? Or do you lose, your promotion or your rating just because you disagreed with your boss, right? And I think that is where you should capture diversity. And it could be in any shape, size, and form, rather than, again, the same cookie cutter. I Googled it, DEI means this, Pride Week, it is blah, blah, blah. And that is how you punch it in your, values or something like that. And I personally don't think that is the way I would go. If I were back, in a corporate setting, I think we should only be committed to meritocracy and pluralism. You do that right, the company will be in a much better situation. You don't need to do this. And if you can keep the bar honest and keep the biases away, all your so-called D&I agenda of some kind will automatically get met. Don't put it the other way around, because then you are actually creating a lot more of resentment, because no one likes to see an average person jump the queue and move ahead, because that doesn't work. So I have a very strong view on this. I don't know whether others would agree.
No,
But
Prabir, in fact, Prabir, there were two things which you said, which I myself really believe that that's at the core of diversity: pluralism and meritocracy. And I have a live personal example in terms of Ernst & Young, when we were building the practice from scratch. So therefore, there were no rules that were laid down. So we had open possibilities in terms of defining the way we want. And I recall when we used to go to campuses and hire people, and we said, just stay with somebody who has high IQ, because you can't serve the HR community if you yourself are not there. So that was almost a non-negotiable, and the right serving attitude. We just took these two, and by default, 55% were women. So I did not proclaim at that point of time that diversity I shall champion. I think some of these are, in some forms, are getting championed out of a certain compulsion. And let me be a little impolite. So in the last 4-5 years, I've seen on LinkedIn, suddenly everybody who's in the community is a well-being champion. Now, my whole point is, well-being of individual employees has always been a business imperative, not today. 40 years back when I started my career, it was equally important. But I think the transition in terms of the way we are doing it, that tokenism is a very dangerous element in itself. And if the core belief is not there, you can just put the ticks. No, you don't have to wait for the government. Let me take, in the larger context, most of you are aware, in 1912, Tata Steel actually introduced 8 hours. They introduced maternity benefits. They introduced leave with pay. No, they were not waiting for a promulgation of law, or they were not highlighting the need to be able to create good practices. They just stayed being good. And it resulted in this policy as a default. And which is what I was saying, if your core people philosophy is clear, these are all default outcomes. Diversity automatically is a matter of acceptance. And therefore, the pluralism that talked of is at the heart of actually being right, and therefore right things will happen.
Let me come in, Ajita, because as much as Prabir and Rajan are whatever they're saying, we can't find faults. For me, and I can talk from my personal experience, gender was not even part of my identity till really, really late in my life, right? Because you had a certain background in certain education stuff. You went and you never thought that you are any different, and I never thought I'm more empathetic or less empathetic. I can do numbers, etc. Those weren't even there. But having seen some parts of the organization and having been somebody who took a break, came back into the workforce, and perhaps around that time I started feeling maybe there is something that needs to be done, because essentially any selection or hiring process is a rejection process. And in that, is it balanced? And I'm not talking bias-free and meritocracy. Like, I can give Axis Bank example. In rural India, we have 3-4% diversity, right? And women weren't joining. And I was saying, where are the women? It's not as if women are not born there or women are not getting educated there. Why aren't you getting women there? And what I realized is when you started looking at the catchment areas differently, it's about not giving women a choice to say, am I okay to do this job or not? People were making choice for them. Even as you talk about meritocracy and having a balance, you need to represent, or organizations need to represent or be the same as what the society is in, with the same education patterns. That should be the endeavor for you to say everybody has a voice and a choice and be pluralistic. India has the largest population of PWDs. It's, in a sense, we are blind to them. I don't see them anywhere in mainstream. You got to do a little bit there. We have one of the largest population neurodivergent kids. Where are they? If organizations don't make the investment to represent their organizations in the same manner as the society is, we will lose a chance. Yes, meritocracy is critical. Hence, we've got to do it very, very intentionally, not as a slam dunk mandate, not as virtue signaling every Women's Day, doing tons of activities and giving roses to people and saying, okay, I'm Mera diversity quota, and doing those pride marches. Actually, that's bunkum. Nothing comes out of it. It is the daily practices that you do, how your selection practices are, how your internal career practices are. And in this, and I'll be more optimistic, I think I'm more optimistic of the future, given some of the barriers will be removed in terms of technology, etc. So life stage events, I think should, the fact that life stage events are a barrier, we should have enablers. We should have enablers to even people with disabilities having a voice choice in the workplace because of technology. So I am very, very hopeful. But I think organizations have a responsibility to be pluralistic themselves rather than cloning themselves and having hiring practices, not rejection practices.
Joe, I would like to come to you now. Is it easier for you, to break through the DEI biases that exist in many organizations since you're a new age company, or do you also battle the similar biases?
We have a different challenge. In a new age company, the performance-driven metric is so high. Everybody is. The pressure to deliver is very high for the organization. So I think everybody wants the best team for them, right? So we have a different challenge of actually making the leaders understand how much is diversity important. And I'm not only talking about gender, but just to, I think some of the points that some of the leaders have said in terms of how having a diverse, people from different industry, how do you actually hear people having different thought process and different ideas coming together, right? Because we are a younger organization, I don't think diversity has ever been an issue. We have good numbers and the way because of the flexibility, because of the way we operate, we never have any issue in attracting particular kind of diversity, if I may say. But I think a challenge for us is also to think beyond. So that's when the tussle comes between, while there is always a number to say, how do you also, in the meantime, build a diverse workforce? So that's where people from different kind of, communities to come together and work with you. I think that's a challenge in a startup. We're just drafting a DI agenda, if I may say, but having to find a balance between results versus some of these initiatives which are very important. I think that's a challenge that remains for most of the new organizations.
Interesting. Now that we come to the last leg of the conversation, I know Dr. Rajan has a hard stop. I want to quickly ask you about the most controversial question, the topic rather. There's been lots of debate about, the 70-hour-a-week work culture, 90 hours a week the work culture. I would like to hear from you. How realistic is it, especially in an era where mental burnouts are so high?
Just very quickly in terms of the fact that even Amul actually has taken out a ad today in the papers in terms of their traditional style of picking up a contextual topic. I think there is enough that has been said about it. But I think in any communication, and especially leadership communication, the difficulty is the fact that today it is so much quicker in terms of the way information flows. I think Prabir or Raj were talking about the speed of getting to know things. So, but in any communication, there are three elements in it. There is a core intent. What's the intent of the individual, really? But there is a form in which you communicate it, and there is a content that gets communicated. Now, somewhere there is slip of the tongue in terms of where it goes and how it gets seen. So, I don't want to go into that aspect of it. But I think I was sharing the example of Tata Steel, which promulgated a lot of policies much before they became a law. And I was talking about the data working day, which is exactly antithetical to the topic we are discussing. My belief is that if you're looking at an individual, I mean, there was a statement that was made saying extraordinary efforts are required for extraordinary outcomes. I didn't hear extraordinary compensation. Now, ultimately, when you're talking of a psychological contract, there has to be an ownership on both ends. I mean, I can set, it's not a one-way street, right? I can set whatever expectations I want of anybody else, but what is in it for him? No, the problem with a position like this is that, and what is good for me need not be good for you. And that's why when we're talking about even elements of diversity, the idea is that while you have to treat everybody equally, you also have to have the sagacity to understand that people are different. And therefore, as a leader, it's important to unravel fears. It's important to appreciate concerns. It's very important to understand aspirations and find a way to help them achieve potential. But it can't just be my story. I think that is what gets a little worrisome when I look at it. It's not so much in terms of number of hours. If I love to do something, I will do it. But do I love to do it, or am I there only to earn a living because of whatever conditions I am in? So, which is why I said, pain is very unique to an individual. And I think, therefore, your larger ability to be able to understand that is a very important element. And leave aside 80 hours, 70 hours, 60 hours. I mean, we know the linkages in terms of productivity. There are developing nations which are struggling in terms of large number of hours and less productivity. And the other way around is happening in developed nations. So there are enablers to productivity that have to do with the number of hours you spend. But leaving all that aside, I think there is a important element here that are we committed to holistic and humanistic development of people? Are they just a resource that I have to harness? We are not in the sugarcane business, right? In terms of crushing the juice out of somebody. You are here where you're talking about somebody who is an integral part of your human capital, the enterprise. And there is an intellectual capital, there is social capital. We are talking about, a long time back, we talked about the fact that, every day I come into the office, the fact that there are people there is what makes the organization living. And when you talked about corporate mortality, I think somewhere when it becomes a one-way street, I think mortality is inevitable. No, that's my personal view on this. I mean, leave aside who said what. I think the contexts are different. Why people say what they say is different. I mean, they might be having a different intent altogether, which may be a good intent. But that's not the issue. For me, the core concern is how we understand the contract between an employee and employer. Is it psychological? And I had mentioned it earlier. Is there a mutual benefit? You cannot create great relationships if there is no reciprocity, if there is no mutual interest, if there is no shared vision and purpose. I think that is what actually creates the enterprise to be a long-living enterprise. I mean, that's my personal belief on this subject.
The other thing I'll just add, very well said, and I love the sugarcane example. But I think one of the other things is, when you thought of work was synchronous. We were all together doing things at the same time, etc. We are living in an asynchronous world, right? Communication is asynchronous. Everything is asynchronous. So the choices are also asynchronous. When you're looking at n is equal to 1 world, you may work at 2 o'clock in the night, it works. Somebody else can work in the morning and finish it off. But, the thing that I would guard against is, especially I talked initially as well, for me, the device is becoming the workplace and there's a danger of working 24/7. And that, I think we need to have some boundaries and people have to figure out their own boundaries, but expecting everybody is going to be clocking at the same time, going to be seeing, etc. Maybe that also expectation needs to change. where we want people to come to office, clock in 12 hours a day, etc. I understand the purpose of having human interactions, but such conversations also perhaps need a reset. And since you're talking about future of workplace, and that I think is also something we need to push forward on.
Prabir, we would like to hear from you, your take on this.
Yeah, I've already written on this subject. It's got 1 million views, comments, reactions. So I think I have taken a public position on this, as I did with the 70-hour week. So I won't get into the details. The simple thing is, as Rajan says, it's a psychological contract, and you need to be mindful and respectful of that. First part. If someone needs to work, someone will come to complete the work. I have never called a meeting late in the evening in my entire career, and never did a meeting on a Saturday or a Sunday ever in my life. And I don't think I did a bad job from a reputation or impact perspective. So it's all meaningless. My problem with this actually is that you assume that we are living in the industrial age, and it's all about carrying bricks and tons of cement on your head. If that is your definition and expectation of your people, I'm sorry, you are a leader of a medieval age, period. Nothing. You have no excuse at all of trying to say it was out of context, I never meant it, and some lousy PR recovery campaign happening after that. People are people. Nor is the average person sitting in the C-suite where you have better money, cars, drivers, household staff where someone can chip in. I mean, I moved the largest company where I headed HR from a 6-day week to a 5-day week. And I was told that it's not in our DNA, and I got the DNA to change that. So it's all about belief and conviction of what do you want to do. And, at the end of the day, if it's an engineering company, they should realize, why do they follow preventive maintenance? Because the machine can break down. Don't you think that about people? And and that is why I talk about the hypocrisy of leadership. We talk all the big things from the pulpit. You go to an HR conference, a leadership conference, the CEO, CHRO, they all say the lovely big things. And the hypocrisy is it doesn't get done in their companies. And it gets my goat. Stop talking about it if you don't do it. And that is my issue, that at the end of the day, when will India start believing the power is about innovative thinking? I don't need to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. I need to work smart. I need to think. And I will tell you, in my new avatar as an entrepreneur, as an advisor, I actually do lesser hours, far lesser hours than when I was on the other side of the table. But I think I get a lot more out of that hour. Now, which is a smarter way of working? So, a lot of this entire obsession with days and hours is you are assuming people should look busy. Why? And I think Raj talked about that in her opening comments about productivity. And I agree. And I also liked what she just said. I am a person who sleeps at 9:30 at night. And someone calls me at 9 o'clock. I don't take the call because I am not receptive. I'm not, what opinion or advice can I give you? You call me at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm ready to go. So people have different times when they are productive. Be respectful, give people some space. For me, it's Max from I Know It All. And in my career, I used to use this line, Papa does not know best anymore. And I continue to maintain that line applies to every leader in every company, to all of us, because with our own children, we cannot mandate. We are talking about employees who have a right to kind of walk out tomorrow. I don't think it is the right framing of reference, and societally we must work hard. I'm not saying we must not work hard, but we must not work like a mule. We need smarter minds. We just don't need, we are not fighting a medieval age war. We are fighting a new modern age war, which is 24/7. And I think we have to smarten our leadership. And just because you have a certain title or you've got something, to expect that you'll not get a muck on your face is assuming things which don't happen in today's interconnected world.
Thank you so much. I think we've overshot our time by 10 minutes, but it was an extremely insightful conversation. I have learned a lot more topics for me to write about, so I should reach out to you all very soon. So thank you so much for
Yes,
making
thank you
time.
very much. It was absolutely a delight to listen to everybody. And, as expected, everybody spoke very, very openly as well. And that's what makes this discussion so lively and, such a lovely thing. Ajita
Aditya, any
and
final thoughts?
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been pleasure hosting you all and listening and learning from all of you, your experiences. We look forward to, putting all of this together in the future ready workforce study, which will come out in Fortune in some time.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody,
you.
and
See you.
thank you,
Thank you.
Ajita
Thank you
and
so
Aditya.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank